Hey everyone, welcome to Founders 365 with me, Stephen Haggerty. Today I'm joined by Sam Clarke, who founded Gnewt, which is, I should say, not was, it's still around, is a electrical courier company. Am I right? Is that how I would describe it?
Yeah, I guess we're a last mile delivery company, but using
Last
a
one.
fully electric fleet. Yeah.
Amazing. Welcome on the show, Sam. Super pleased you're here. First things first, the question that I ask everyone is just a very broad question in the sense like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about Gnewt, and obviously you've exited that Gnewt now, so tell me what you're up to now.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I'm Sam. I've always been pretty much a founder of companies until very recently. I've always been involved in electric vehicles. I've been commuting by electric vehicle for 15 years,
Wow.
and I've been running a last mile delivery company with a fully electric fleet for 10 of those 15 years. So I think electric vehicles has always been my baby, really. I don't know why. I guess I do know why, but I kind of fell into it at an early stage in the very early 2000s when I was in China a lot and saying, I think this might be the future. And I'd like to think I was somewhere near right.
Yeah.
So ever since then, I've been involved in companies that have had electric vehicles at their core, really.
15 years in the electrical
Yeah,
vehicle world.
I
Uh,
know.
did,
I know.
did you used to have, what were they called? The G Whizzes? Have you had a G Whiz?
Yes, have one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few other names
Are they
around.
still around?
No, I don't think so. I don't think. Well, no. Then I've seen a few around Westminster from time
Yeah.
to time, but I think that's fairly legacy driven. If you excuse the pun. I think, yeah, I think they've probably had their day now. But it's like everything. Every mobile phone we've ever had, depending on how old you are, you look a little younger than me. But the original ones weren't great, and then they got
No.
better and better. And electric vehicles and that sort of world is in the same trajectory, really.
Exactly. But 15 years in the industry, you must just have this unbelievable scope of the evolving world that is electric vehicles, both personal and commercial, because your business was mainly commercial business, right, with the couriers and that side of things. But obviously throughout that time, if you're involved in it, you've obviously seen the scope of the personal vehicles as well. How has it been being one of those early adopters and the changes that you've saw throughout that time in general?
Yeah, I think when you're in a market that is in its proper infancy, or possibly even the glint of an eye of people looking at this for the future, it's a hell of a journey when you're in that sort of industry that didn't really exist and then has suddenly become something quite substantial. And probably the last 3 or 4 years, especially in terms of electrification of vehicles generally, has become a lot more mainstream. Or certainly, I mean, there's still only 1 or 2% of people in the UK driving an electric vehicle, but
Oh
that's
wow.
going to, in less than 15 years' time, it's going to be illegal to buy a diesel or a petrol car. So to even say that sentence out loud, if I wind the clock back 10 or 15 years, I think that's just insane. But
Yeah.
it is where we are now, and or where we're going, which is quite exciting. But yeah, it's been difficult. I mean, as all business startups are, as I'm sure many of your previous contributors will have said as well. But yeah, in a market that didn't really have any technology to use in the early days, that made it even harder. But it is what it is. If you're gonna try and carve a niche in a particular space, and you think your idea is good enough, then you just have to work hard to somehow make it work. And with technology, we just had to try and make it work.
Do you think it was harder at the start when there wasn't many other people in the industry doing what you were doing, or towards more recent times when I'm sure you've had more competitors crop up and you can maybe start to learn from one another in some sort of sense? Did you notice any difference in those two time zones?
Yeah, definitely. I think electric vehicles are pretty. 15 years ago were very new. 10 years ago, I was trying to find a way of using those in a business environment that was going to stack up from a general survival point of view, but profitability point of view, commercial viability, etc. And to do that, I chose the delivery world. Now that's already long in existence, has been around a very long time, very competitive and very, very tiny margins. So on reflection, maybe not the greatest target business market, but yeah, so low margins and hugely competitive, but we had a little niche and nobody else was doing it. So that was the opportunity to punch above our weight a little bit and be able to play with the big boys, because we had something that was unique. And the benefit of playing with the big boys in some respects was that we had no legacy. so we were able to adapt very easily and quickly to the environment in front of us today, whereas the big guys had to sort of, like tankers, had to turn very slowly and could only react, months or years in advance, rather than the days or weeks that we were able to tailor our model. So I think in the early stages it was useful to be small and nimble. But then, as you say, and to answer your question a little bit more, certainly from the later years or the more recent years, there's an awful lot of competitors around in that market doing the same thing, effectively copying our business model, which is fine. In many ways, that's a really flattering thing, because the big guys now have suddenly woken up to electrification and gone, actually, we really should be doing something about this. And now all of the big carriers have a proportion, not 100%, like we have, but they've got a much larger fleet, and a very small percentage of those is electric. But it's fantastic to see it starting in the big companies. So went from trying to carve a niche with no competitors, but in a competitive market, to actually being in a position where everybody, including the big guys, were trying to have a piece of the same pie.
Definitely. And when you started Gnewt, did you know, 10 years ago, did you know 10 years on what it would be formed into? Did you have that strong vision, or were you sort of like, let's just try this out, it seems like it will work?
I think,
or somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between, right? I think all businesses probably say the same thing. I think we had a firm strategy. We knew where we wanted to go, but where we ended up was perhaps in a slightly different place. But we started the business with cargo cycles and bicycles and electric stuff that was very small, very light, very easy to repair. So the business was built around cargo cycles originally, and then within maybe a year they were all gone, and it was a fleet of vans, because that's what the business needed. And I didn't really see that coming. We had one small electric van, and the rest of the fleet were bikes. And within a year, that 90%, 10% ratio would flip the other way.
Wow.
So all the way through the journey, things have changed. Some of what we perceived to be our largest competitors to begin with ended up being the people that we actually worked on behalf of. So, and now in the more recent years, those big guys that we used to work on behalf of are now our competitors, like we thought they'd be at the beginning, because now they're trying to do the same thing as what we've been doing. So so it evolves all the time, but you just have to roll with those punches, don't you, I suppose.
And you also did something very smart, in the sense where you, in terms of your personal positioning, you made sure that you were positioning yourself in front of the mayor and all these other avenues. Did that help in the sense of, well, two questions in that. Did you do that consciously, or did those opportunities come around because of the space you're in?
Both. But I have, in the last 3 or 4 years, very consciously tried to use the interest in the business, and perhaps to a certain extent me, in terms of my experience in this field, to as much gain as possible. So I've agreed to do it within reason, as many public speaking engagements as I can, if I think that it's going to help the business, and I think it's going to help me too, to be honest. Because that's how you get your name out there, and it's great going to exhibitions and events and having a look around. But if you're one of the people stood on stage talking about it, then rather than you trying to engage with everyone in the room, everyone's sat there having to engage with you, because that's what they're there to listen to people. So I found the public speaking element really, really helpful, because it means you can address a lot of people in one go. And then inevitably at the end of each presentation, you get 5 or 10 people come up who want to have a conversation about something. So those people come to you rather than the other way around. Easy said, but you have to have a story that is good enough that people want you to be on stage in the first place.
And you've got to enjoy it.
You've got to enjoy it, yeah, definitely. And I didn't necessarily enjoy it at the beginning. You've got to have a reasonable amount of confidence and courage in your own convictions. But also, people turn off and glaze over presentations very quickly if it's full of lines of bullet points. And if you're trying to sell too much, we always wanted to. Well, I've always wanted to try and create a story. We've always been proud of what we've achieved, and we've told the story about how we've done it. Not necessarily, please buy from me, because people get turned off by that. So you've got to sort of lace that in everything you do, but at the same time, it needs to be a journey, a story, something that people are engaging with and find inspiring, hopefully. And if you achieve that, then you're halfway there.
Exactly. What I'm really intrigued to know is, from your positioning, there must be so many exciting companies that you see now that are starting up, that are trying to be like the next pioneer in the electrical world. What sort of things do you think are going to be implemented in terms of the mass market in the next couple of years that you perhaps have seen a sneak peek that others may not have?
Well, I think I mean, 15 plus years ago, I think I was pretty confident that electric vehicles were coming, and I think it's fair to say they're here now. It's just a case
Yeah.
of the mass adoption rather than the early adopters who are taking the forefront. I think the charging infrastructure element of it, which is where I'm going next, is a big piece of the puzzle. So you used to have big OEMs building vehicles, and then you had the big oil companies filling it with dead dinosaurs to power them along, right? But the model's changing now. So the electric vehicle of the future is being powered by this stuff called electricity, which a lot of people will be able to put in their cars on the basis of being parked on their own driveway. The range is different, and the whole infrastructure and the behavioural pattern of the way we use vehicles potentially in the next 10 or 15 years is going to change. So we're going to go from filling up at a petrol station to either charging on our driveways, if we have them, and if you don't, then using an electric forecourt, for example. And then there's a whole piece around autonomy and induction charging and the ownership model. Are we going to own cars in the future? Probably not. Are we going to lease them? Almost certainly. Are we going to own them at all? Are they just going to turn up on our driveways when we need them and we sort of order them on our iPhones? I don't know the answer to those rhetorical questions, I suppose, but I think the landscape is going to evolve dramatically over the next 10 or 15 years, I think.
What would you love to happen? Like if you had an ideal situation in terms of how we interact with electric vehicles, what's your dream situation? Is it the totally autonomous? Is it more of what we have now, but switching it to, home charging, still all own vehicles or leasing, whatever that situation is?
I think personally, I love driving.
Yeah.
I used to race race karts when I was a young lad. My parents are both racing drivers, so racing has been a little bit in the blood, I suppose. But I generally like driving. I enjoy that sensation. So I like to have a car. And I've got a young family too, so we need that vehicle to get us around. But I also want to enjoy using it at the same time. And I used to love petrol and diesel cars a long time ago, whereas I'm completely, as you might expect, converted now to some fairly quick electric vehicles instead. But that I wouldn't want to lose that. I don't know whether autonomy and ordering a vehicle, and I quite like a degree of ownership, not necessarily owning the asset parked on the driveway depreciating every minute, but certainly I like the idea of a lease model and having control of a vehicle. But also driving an electric car is just great. It's quiet and it's smooth and it's fun. And they accelerate very quickly, and you have a lot of enjoyment out of them.
We have a strange relationship with cars, don't we? And so I think especially in the UK, I'm exactly the same as you. I love driving. If I could just spend all day in the car just driving around for like enjoyment rather than a purpose, I guess I would do that. I've still got a petrol car, shoot me. But both my brothers have electric cars, so
okay, well that's good.
We're evening out on we're evening out on the family impact, I guess. But I would not want to see, like I'm exactly the same as you. I would not want to see a total autonomous vehicle, because it's those little moments in cars that I really love. When you've got a song on the radio and you're having to sing, or you're chatting with your family or whoever else in the car. Those moments that cannot happen in any other situation apart from in a car. And I think in terms of the mass market, I think that's probably one of the struggles that people come up with when you talk about the future of vehicles and the future of driverless cars or more autonomous vehicles. It's those moments that I think people forget that are kind of just not getting spoken about. Not that they should, but it is that emotional attachment to a car. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, I think it does. And the technology is not going to be autonomous. Order on your iPhone, it turns up, overnight. That if that is the direction we end up going, it's going to take some time anyway. So I think it needs to be a slow transition. And as you say, it's not going to be right for everybody.
Yeah.
The first thing we've got to do is get all these people out of their diesel and petrol cars, to be honest, because it's a horrendous pollutant. And if there's one positive thing we can take out of the dreadful thing that is the coronavirus at present, is that is the lack of pollution is quite alarming.
Noticeable change.
Yeah, and that's demonstrating what a non-petrol or diesel world could look like from an air quality point of view. And if there is any positives to take out of a horrendous situation, it's been able to demonstrate to us what the quality of air could be like for all of us and our kids and everyone else that's breathing in this air, especially in places like London, which part of the reason why I moved out of London was because of the poor air quality, that I wasn't willing to bring up my two boys breathing in every day. It just wasn't acceptable to me.
That's a really good point, because it's all, it's also the noticeably how quickly the feel of the air has changed. I live in Essex, so not exactly a very high pollution area like London, but still pollution. And even here, if I leave the house to go for my 1 hour long walk, I can notice the difference in the air quality just from 2 weeks or a week of people not using their cars, or huge reduction in that at least. So that's a really amazing point that you bring up there.
Yeah, and I did a few presentations in the last couple of years on air quality generally, specifically to transport, as you might expect. But one of the exercises I did as part of my preparation for that was to look at some air quality maps of London and where I lived in that scenario, where I did live in London, and it was alarming to me that you could see the density of the pollution in the middle. I was lucky enough to live in West London, and it was a nice part of town, and you sort of zoom into that area, and it's a lot. The pollution is less. However, I live quite close to a main road called the South Circular, which is one of the main arteries into London. And the more and more I zoomed in, the more I realised how close I was to that main artery, which was effectively still red, in terms of red being really bad pollution. And then more alarming than that, as I zoomed in, I could see my kids' primary school, which was literally on that red line.
Wow.
At that point, it struck me that whilst I was fortunate to live in a nice part of town that was reasonably low pollution, and yet I was actually very, very close to a main arterial route that had a huge amount of pollution, and I was sending my kids into that toxic air every day.
Yeah, it makes it become
that wasn't acceptable to me.
It makes it become very visual, right? It's almost, you can see the bubbles around the school and things like that. So I'm not surprised you now moved out of London and have a much nicer quality of air, at least.
Yeah, which is a shame. As many people probably listening to this, will be in London. So I'm not saying that run out of London it's terrible, but at the same time, what we need to do is improve London, and improve everywhere. But London obviously is a hot spot for air quality and poor pollution. So anything we can do to electrify and get as many vans, cars, buses, bikes, motorbikes, whatever, off combustion engines is going to be good for everybody. I still go to London pre-virus. I would go to London 2 or 3 days a week. So I'm still breathing that stuff in, just like everybody else. So it means a lot to me to try and decarbonize our economy as quickly as we can, because otherwise it's just nasty. Yeah, we've got to wake up to that sooner or later.
And there's not going to be a magic pill that you can take and suddenly become immune to it all. It has to be done, led from the vehicles, the pollution-based businesses and people and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk about what you're focusing on now, because was it the end of last year that you left Gnewt?
Well, I'm technically still there, but not for much longer. But I stepped down from Gnewt, or resigned from Gnewt at the beginning of this year, 2020. To go on to pastures new. So I sold the company 2.5 years ago, and it's now time for me to move on. So I did a decade's worth of Gnewt, and it kind of feels almost poetic, really, that that new decade, a new start. And so I'm moving into a company which the CEO of which I've known for something like 17 years. So he started out a similar time to me in the electric infrastructure space. So I've learned an awful lot over the years about EVs and about charging infrastructure and how to use them and how to operate them, and on scale as well, I might add. So it's quite nice to go somewhere that's on that trajectory. And the plan is to build over 100 electric forecourts around the UK that will be able to fulfill very, very fast charging for up to 24 vehicles at least simultaneously. Amazing. As well as happy coffees and everything else, and have an education centre, and potentially even lease a new vehicle from there. So we're doing a bit of everything, not just the charge point, but an absolute experience that includes the same sort of things that people are used to doing at a petrol station or service station, but perhaps a little bit nicer, a little bit more premium, a little bit cleaner, but also just as functional and as easy to use. And that for me is where I'm taking the next part of my career, is on that path, because it's something like £1 billion project in total, which we want to try and deliver over the next 4 or 5 years, and change the landscape quite literally of the way which people are going to refuel or recharge their vehicles in the future. So for me, it's the opportunity to expand my knowledge base a little bit beyond the small SME and a bit beyond London and more across the country, and hopefully hopefully address this electrification of the nation, in a more national perspective.
Exactly. How does it feel to go from Gnewt, which you founded, to the new role, which I'm going to throw you under the bus and get you to say your job title, because it is, I love it.
It's Chief Vehicle Electrification Officer. So yeah,
that will never get old. But how does that shift feel in terms of moving from that founder position to the CE? Yeah.
It's something I've had to sort of come to terms with. I'm not saying it's a negative by any stretch.
No, not at all.
I've been running my own businesses for pretty much most of my adult life, but that's been a huge privilege, but also bloody hard work. And at the moment, in my stage in life, the idea of having a smaller slice of a larger pie is quite appealing.
Yeah.
And I would, it's just ask me that question again in 10 years and I may have a different answer. But at the moment, it's an opportunity in a hugely growing market that I can hopefully contribute to something that's just recently started, but is booming.
Yeah.
And I know the CEO very, very well, and it just feels like the right path at the moment. And I'm the fact that it isn't mine, I don't own it. It doesn't concern me. It's more about what we can really do together as a group of fairly well, hopefully reasonably intelligent people, if I include myself in that, with some good experience in the solar world and the renewable energy world and the electric vehicle world, and we can, as a group, we can do something quite special. And for the time being, I'm really quite excited about doing just that.
Yeah, I can hear the passion and excitement from you, which is really nice to hear, because I feel like a lot of founders, when they sell a company or they move on to something new, there's often a huge sense of lost and not really sure what to do. But it's so nice and refreshing to see that you're already getting involved in this, like you said, £1 billion project. And also, weirdly enough, it kind of sounds like it's at that same sort of stage when you started Gnewt, in terms of no one else has really done what you guys want to do, or what you guys are planning to do in that sense. So in a weird parallel universe, you're repeating time in some form or another.
Yeah, I think so. But at the same time, your point at the beginning of that is also true, in the sense that on the 1st of September 2017, I was no longer a business owner. And I had to come to terms with that. And now we're April 2020. So I've had a bit of time to settle my brain into the fact that I'm not the owner of my own company anymore. And that's taken a bit of time. That wasn't something that I could stomach on day one that well, to be honest. So and also I've had to work, well, not had to, but I've worked within a large corporate, so that my company's been gobbled up by a much bigger one, and I've had to learn and adapt to working in that corporate environment as well. So that hasn't always been easy either. So it's not been plain sailing in that regard. There's an emotional thing where you have to sort of I think switching overnight is tricky. So it's taken me sort of 2.5 years to find my next path. So it's not like it's not been that straightforward.
Never is, though, is it? It's one of those things where I think when you leave a certain identity, it is that finding that excitement. How did it feel though when this opportunities came up and you thought, oh, actually, yeah, maybe this is the one I want to focus on now?
I was pretty excited. I mean, the reason why it came about was, again, going back to one of our previous points, I was presenting at an event about charging infrastructure and electric vehicles, and the CEO was in the audience, and he came up to me and he effectively reintroduced himself, because we'd known each other a long time, but drifted apart. So he sort of reintroduced himself to me, and we had a chat. And then, before I knew it, I was an advisory board member and doing a bit of consultancy. I thought, this is great fun, So there was a degree of comfort in the transition from one place to another, which you don't always get, I don't think. So I think I've been fairly fortunate. Well, I say fortunate. I mean, luck is a funny thing, isn't it? The harder you work, the luckier you get, and the more stuff you do. Yeah, it's funny how that works, right? So, you've got to put yourself in the right places, which is what I did. So it's been quite a very easy transitional thing for me to adapt to because of that circumstance. But yeah, you have to make your own luck and put yourself in the right places for those sort of opportunities to present themselves. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
No, excellent, Sam. Listen, one of my final questions to you is, and one that I ask all my guests, but if you could give 3 tips to other founders that perhaps are going through a similar journey that you went through, whether they've just started out or perhaps they're going through that sales cycle and leaving their founded company, what would those 3 tips be for you to give?
Yeah, but there's two different streams there, I think, in terms of going through the business phases. I mean, I think just never giving up and working every hour of every day. You know, if you're not prepared to do that, forget it. You're not going to make it. Simple as that. That, you know, because running businesses big and small is hard. And even when we grew 70% year on year, that was probably some of the hardest times. It sounds great, doesn't it? But that's tough. You know, it's really, really hard trying to keep something going when you're growing that quickly. So, yeah, just keep working hard no matter what level you're at or whatever stage you're at. As far as exiting is concerned, I mean, that's a tricky one because every entrepreneur's journey is different. Although you sit around a room with entrepreneurs or founders, and it's amazing how many things you can relate to that are actually the same. But in the same breath, if you've sold a company and you're part of it still, that journey can be very, very different for different people. You know, I know people who have sold businesses and stayed in it for the rest of their careers. But I've also known probably quite a few more people that have found it very, very difficult and have tried to jump out at the very earliest opportunity. So I think it's a bit of a horses for courses in terms of exiting, or if you've got some degree of time in still. But just don't fall out with anybody because it won't do you any favors. You know, it's very easy to get very frustrated with the way that the new guard comes in and moves things around. But if you throw your toys out of the pram at the first opportunity, no one comes off well out of that. So it's just a case of trying to manage the situation and not falling out with anyone, because, you know, burning bridges is of no good to anyone.
No. Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Listen, one final question. Dream electric car. What's your dream? If you don't have it already, if it's not already sat on the drive.
It kind of is, if I'm honest. Yeah, it's
I thought it might be.
Yeah, well, it's nothing too fancy, but I've got a Tesla Model 3,
Nice.
which I absolutely adore. And it's by far and away nowhere near the most expensive of the Teslas. And there's lots of other high performance electric cars out there too. But as far as this is going to sound a little dull, I suppose, but as far as general family practicality, it's got everything I need. It does, you know, 250 miles and goes 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. So it basically covers every base in one car. So yeah, it's my first ever Tesla, and I love it, and I can't really see myself changing it anytime soon.
Did you pre-order the Cybertruck?
No, I didn't. Although I do love the idea of it, but it's ridiculously big. I think if I had that, we've got space for 2 cars on our driveway, but I've got a feeling if I had a Cybertruck, then one of the cars is going to have to go to fit it in, because I think
it's the modern equivalent of a Hummer, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a Hummer Plus, isn't it?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
exactly.
I haven't seen one in the flesh, obviously, yet, but I can't wait to drive one. That's going to be interesting.
That'll be amazing. Sam, listen, thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed our conversation. I'm really looking forward to seeing your next 10 years evolve and where you're at. And maybe in 10 years' time, we can come back here and see what happens. If anyone wants to get in touch with you and speak to you directly, what's the best way for them to do that?
LinkedIn, probably. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn.
Sam Clarke with an E.
Sam Clarke with an E, yeah. There's probably a few of those, but
yeah. I'll tag you in this anyway, so people will see you. But no, thank you, Sam, for coming on to Founders 365. I've, like I said, thoroughly enjoyed it.
No worries. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching, and I'll catch you next time.